let me record this. So this took 6 months total, and so what I want to share with you is the experience of developing and evaluating this course. Before I start talking about the research study itself, I want to give you a little bit of information. I am introducing myself academically speaking. So I have an MA in English didactics from this university. I graduated in 2013. And my first diploma, let me just take one step back, is I have a BA in English language teaching. Then in 2013, I finished my graduate studies here in the Master of Arts in English Didactics. And then in 2017, I finished another master's in the USA. And I was talking to you as the director of this program a couple of minutes ago, but now I will be talking to you as a fellow colleague, as an English language teacher, and someone who is interested, very much interested in assessment and how language assessment can help English teachers be better. So that's what the experience will be about, what I will be telling you about. And my presentation covers the research aspects, the research procedures I conducted, and at the end, I will be focusing mostly on some recommendations for other people to think of assessment courses that they can develop online and that can be helpful for teachers in their contexts. So I want to start by giving you a little bit of the context for this research study. In 2022, I had the opportunity to get a Fulbright scholarship. Fulbright is an association that promotes the mobility between the universities in the United States and universities all over the world. So I had the chance to go to a university in the United States where I did my master's, my second master's. So it was a very nice experience because I went back to my alma mater. And Fulbright Colombia was the organization in charge of sponsoring everything. So that's why I have to give them credit. Another thing that made my research experience in the States possible was that I was given permission by my university to conduct research exclusively. And that's what I did during the second semester of 2022. I came back to Colombia in January, at the end of January this year. The name of the scholarship is called is Visiting Colombian Scholar or Researcher. So what you get to do there as a Colombian researcher or scholar is to do the research with a professor in the United States. So this was during the second semester of last year. And the objective of the whole project, that again was sponsored by Fulbright Colombia, was to design and teach an online assessment course for 50 English language teachers in Latin America. I wrote a proposal that involved, that was aiming to involve 50 English language teachers in Latin America. At the end, we had 14, 15 teachers who completed all of the stages, the 2 stages in the project. And I will be giving you more details about that in a little while. But this was the objective of the whole project, which was, thanks God, achieved successfully. I was supported by Dr. Shun Yan. He is a professor in the linguistics department of the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. University of Illinois, sorry. So this university is where I did my master's when I finished in 2017. And last year I had the chance to go back there, but not to study, but to do research with this professor who was my course instructor when I was a student in the MA over there. So we became peers, let's say. What I want to talk to you about is the theoretical backbone of the research study. And this is my main research and academic interest. Oh, by the way, since I am the host in this Zoom meeting, I am in charge of letting people in. So I will need to stop sometimes to let people in the waiting room enter the Zoom call. So please bear with me if that is the case. Let me check. No, nobody in the waiting room right now. Okay, so the theory that underlied the study is something called language assessment literacy. So language assessment literacy refers to 3 aspects mainly: the knowledge, skills, and principles that you and I need to do professional language assessment. So If you want to conduct professional language assessment practices as a teacher yourself, there are certain things you should take care of. And there are three components. You need to know some things, so that's knowledge. You need to be able to do some things successfully, so that's skills. And you need to do some things ethically and fairly. That's what we call, in general terms, principles. So those are the three elements of language assessment literacy. And this has become a huge topic of discussion in language education in general. If you notice, this is rather recent. It started with this scholar. His name is Alan Davis, was because he is late now. Alan Davis started discussing this issue in 2008, but then the topic became much more common in 2013 in journals and in research in general in applied linguistics. So language assessment literacy was the main aspect that guided my research and also guided my teaching, because in this project, I was a researcher and I was also an instructor as I was teaching the online course. The research that has been conducted around teachers' language assessment literacy has focused on these two aspects. First, drawing their LAL, meaning making a description of their language assessment literacy. What is it that teachers know about language assessment? What is it that they can do, skills about language assessment or in language assessment? And what is something that what are some of the principles that guide their language assessment? On the other hand, what is the knowledge that they don't have? What are the skills that they don't have? And what are the principles that they don't have? So the research has focused on this aspect, characterizing teachers' language assessment literacy, the state of their language assessment literacy. And another focus of research in language assessment literacy is courses, pedagogical initiatives to help teachers improve their language assessment literacy. So in the literature review, in the research that exists around language assessment literacy, there have been some tendencies. So first of all, teachers' language assessment literacy is complex. And by complex, it's intricate. There are many things going on in teachers' language assessment literacy, and it is also situated. So language assessment literacy, perhaps not surprisingly, is highly contextual. So the skills that you have, the knowledge that you have, and the principles that you have for conducting professional assessment practices depend on your experience in language assessment, your training, and most importantly, where you do your assessment practices. So that's why it is situated. When teachers are asked about their language assessment needs, something that they report is that they want to improve the practical aspect of assessment. They want to become better at designing instruments, at making the connection between assessment and teaching and learning. They want to expand their assessment repertoire, basically. That's a big finding in the literature. I highlighted this study here because Villalarenas and other colleagues, they conducted a study in Latin America. Notice the year, this was in 2021. So I studied that study in order to find some assessment needs of English language teachers in Latin America. So one of those needs is the practical aspect. So teachers want to, as I said before, expand their repertoire in language assessment. And in terms of the courses that are offered for teachers, one thing that happens a lot is that teachers become much better. They improve their skills. So there's a positive impact on their skills and knowledge. So when you are in a language assessment course, you learn, for example, about qualities like validity, reliability, authenticity, and you learn that. You know what that is, and you become aware of what that implies in your classroom. And also, and this is kind of the nice touch, you connect that theory to your practice. So you learn about authenticity and then you develop skills so that you can implement or make your assessment practices more authentic. Also, teachers become aware of how assessment can have a good impact on teaching and learning, and how assessment, in fact, is in the service of teaching and learning, not the other way around. Not assessment as an isolated, disjointed aspect of your teaching, but as something that can support your teaching and your students' learning. So that is another tendency in the research studies that have investigated courses or workshops for teachers' language assessment literacy. The general research framework that I used for this study that, again, took place during the second semester of 2022, last year, it was mixed methods. So I collected quantitative, actually, let me rephrase that. Dr. Shun and I collected quantitative and qualitative data. So during the first stage, which is when we asked teachers about their assessment, we characterized their profiles and their needs in language assessment. We asked about their practices, we asked about challenges they have, and we asked about things they would like to learn in the online course. During the second stage, we wanted to ask the participating teachers in the course how they felt in the course and what they thought about the components of the course. To make the mixed methods come to life, we used questionnaires to collect quantitative data. We used an individual interview and then a focus group interview. So I will give you more details about that in a moment. In order to validate the data collection instruments, we asked 6 people who were content experts. Why content experts? Because they knew about teacher education, how to educate teachers, language teachers, and they also knew about language assessment. So they gave us feedback on the questionnaires and the protocols for the individual interview and the focus group interview. Once we got the feedback from the 6 content experts, we made improvements to the questionnaire, the individual interview protocol, and the focus group interview protocol so that we could collect useful information to characterize teachers, LAL, in stage 1, and to determine teachers' perceptions in stage 2. Okay, I'm letting people in the Zoom call. Okay. During the first stage, that was the design. What did we do? We asked the teachers. So this is an example. Wait. Just, yes. The teachers who participated in the design stage, which is usually also called the diagnostic stage, they were 20 English language teachers from 4 Latin American countries. We didn't get any people from Ecuador. That was the idea, but nobody participated, or perhaps they didn't just get the information. There were 5 teachers from Brazil, 8 from Colombia, 5 from Peru, and 2 from Venezuela. They participated in the questionnaire. They completed the questionnaire, and then they participated in an individual interview with me. The individual interview was with me. So this took place before the course was implemented. Oh, by the way, we used the instruments just like this. First, an individual interview, and then the online questionnaire, because we didn't want them to use language from the questionnaire in the interview. We didn't want to have any contaminating variable. So the interview came first. We used Google Forms for the questionnaire and Google Meet for the interviews, because everything was done online, by the way. This is an example of a question I asked in the individual interview. Tell me about how you assess your students. So I asked them follow-up questions like, what is your purpose? What do you do with the information you collect? What skills do you assess when you assess your students' English? And here is an example. I'm needing more people in the Zoom. Here is an example of the questionnaire they got and that they completed online. So we asked them, what about this thing? Do you think it will be important for the course that you're going to take? The teachers knew that the course they were going to, I was asking them for information to plan and to create the course. So what we did here, we made a little bit of a change in the language. We didn't ask them about topics, but we asked them about procedures. For example, if you see the 2 items here, one is designing test items, which blah, 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 and the other one is designing test tasks, which blah, blah, blah. So we used language with which teachers we felt would be familiar, and they made one of these choices, telling us whether they found the topic important for the course or not. So what we found during the first stage was that the teachers across Latin America, this is an example of what happens across these 4 countries, by the way. Again, Brazil, Colombia, Peru, and Venezuela. This is a comment one of the teachers made, but it reflects what happens in these at least 4 countries. And this teacher said, another difficulty is the time. I have 38, 35 or 38 students, so it's so difficult to do one rubric for each student. So time and number of students is a challenge to conduct successful assessment practices. And another thing that, this is something I was telling you before and became apparent in the answers that they gave us in the individual interview is that teachers want to innovate in assessment. They don't want to continue using the same test, let's say. So one of the teachers said, I want to innovate for that they can be a good or a better feedback between them and me, meaning students and the teacher, and we will work better. I really want this kind of tool or innovation tools, not always the same. So the teachers wanted to really instill innovation in their assessment practices. This is from the qualitative data. And in the quantitative data, these are the topics, they are ranked. So if you see the from 1 to 5, notice the scores here in the mean. The scores are pretty high, very close to 5, meaning that they wanted to learn about these different aspects regarding assessment. Range, the number that you see here, the smaller the number, that means the teachers agreed on what they what they thought was really important for the course. So for example, item 10, creating test items and tasks that resemble real-life language use, was the top thing they thought was really extremely important for the course. So this became a topic in the course, and so on and so forth. So as you see here, teachers saw a menu, they liked the menu that they were offered, and they chose many things from that menu. Let me see if I have. So at the bottom, topics that they were not so much interested in or they didn't find as important, but still the numbers are not that bad, where, for example, item 23, designing traditional tests with true, false, and multiple choice questions. So they didn't find that as important for the course. And learning about the history of language testing actually got a, let's say, a negative score, a failing score, which was 2.8. So actually, this topic was not included in the course. So from this stage, and again, this is when we designed the course, we collected information from the teachers to design the course. These are some conclusions. One, the data told us the teachers want to learn about various areas of language assessment, and that is common in language assessment literacy research. Another thing that was pretty common across the interview mostly is that they wanted to learn with other teachers, especially because they knew that they were going to be in this course with other teachers in Latin America. So in the individual interview, and I'm very sorry, I just realized that I didn't include data for that. The teachers told us this continuously. I want to learn with other teachers. I want to see if other teachers in Latin America have the same issues as I do, and I want the course to have spaces to learn with other people. Another thing that the teachers made it clear in the interview and also the questionnaire answers is that they wanted to learn about topics that are not very common in language assessment, but that are becoming trendy. For example, assessing learners with special educational needs. And this is a topic this is an area that was a need in the diagnostic stage and that we included in the course. So these were the three conclusions, the three big conclusions that we gathered from the design stage of the course. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about the course itself. Luzari, you're going to get that information later. Okay, so let me give you some information about the course itself. It was called an online assessment course, OAC for short, OAC. And these were the topics that we covered in the 10 weeks. Let me give you some more information about the course itself. So the course took 40 hours total. There were 10 weeks, and in every week, I met with the teachers 2 times. And there were 2 workshops every week, and each workshop lasted 2 hours. So every week, we met 4 hours, 2 hours on 2 different days. And there were 10 weeks. During the first week, we went over introduction to fundamentals of assessment, like central topics in assessment. In week 2, we went over qualities of language assessment, like authenticity, validity, reliability, classic topics. Then we went into the more, let's say, hands-on aspects of the course. Week 3 was about assessing receptive skills, so teachers learned about how to assess receptive skills professionally. Week 4, assessing productive skills. Week 5, assessing integrated skills. Integrated skills was a top topic they wanted to learn about. Then we went over bilingual assessment, how you can use bilingual assessment in your English class. In week 7, as I was telling you before, we covered the topic of assessing learners with special educational needs. Week 8, alternative assessment. Week 9, ethics and fairness in classroom language assessment. And finally, we made the concluding remarks of how assessment can connect to language teaching and learning. So every topic, every week there was a different topic that we covered for 4 hours. During the implementation of the course, again, I want to make emphasis on this, everything was online because the teachers came from 4 different countries. We used 2 instruments to collect data on their perceptions. One was a focus group interview. The focus group interview was conducted by Dr. Shun Yan, and there was an assistant. This assistant was a student, a PhD student at the University of Illinois, and she was supporting Dr. Shun Yan with participants who spoke Spanish and Portuguese. So whenever they said something in Spanish or Portuguese during the focus group interview, the assistant translated for Dr. Shun Yan, because Dr. Shun Yan doesn't speak Spanish or Portuguese. He speaks English and Chinese. And during the implementation, we gave teachers a questionnaire. During the implementation, there were 14 teachers. In the end, these 14 teachers participated in the whole project. We asked, in the focus group interview and the questionnaire, we asked teachers about their perceptions regarding the contents of the course, the materials they used in the course, and the activities or tasks that we used for teaching them about language assessment. Here's an example from the focus group interview, which again was administered by Dr. Shunyan. He asked them in small groups of 3 or 4 people, what do you think about the materials you have used so far? What do you think about the handbook? What do you think about the technology used in the course? I want to make some emphasis here. The handbook was a little book that I wrote for the teachers. So before we met in class, they read between 10 and 15 pages about the topic for that week. Let's say for week 5, the topic was assessing learners with special educational needs. Before we met online, simultaneously, synchronously, they read about. So that's why we asked them about the handbook. What do you think about the contents you have studied in this course? So these are examples of questions we asked them in the focus group interview. Sorry, Dr. Shun asked them, Shun Yan. And we asked them about how useful they found the topics and contents and activities in class. So we gave them the topics, for example, how to assess receptive skills, listening and reading. So did you find that topic useful for your assessment practices? Not only for the course, but for their assessment practices in their institutions. So the question was something like this. To what extent do you find this topic useful for your assessment practices in your institution? So they would say, how to assess receptive skills? Okay, this is very useful for me. So they would go for a 4. So what did we find during this stage? This is what the teacher said in the focus group interview. This is an example of the focus group interview, sample data that highlights a trend. So one teacher said, I really like the sequence of the topics because they are related and connected. So there is coherence. And all of them are really good for me because that's the thing I was looking for at the beginning of the course. So notice that this teacher, and was a trend in the focus group interview, they noticed that the course, when they were learning in the course, they saw the connection between the contents and activities in the course and what they told us in the design or diagnostic stage. And another teacher said, another topic I was or is assessing learners with the special educational needs. It led me to value these kinds of students. So this teacher was not very much aware of how to assess learners with special educational needs. However, because this was a topic that the teachers expected and they told us about during the diagnostic stage, this teacher became aware of why it is important to assess students with special educational needs, and she or he made that comment very clear in the focus group interview. So they found the topics either relevant or useful for their contexts. About We also asked them, because we wanted to get really useful feedback for the course as well. We also asked them, what is a topic you didn't like or that you didn't find so useful? We asked this in the questionnaire. There was an open question. What topic did you find the least useful, if any? So this is what the teacher said. Statistics for classroom assessment. Statistics was another topic in the course, but not because statistics was hard or because it was boring. This is what the teacher said. This was a commonality, a trend in the answers, because it is not commonly used on a daily basis. So teachers don't see themselves calculating statistics as they are assessing their students. So this was the feedback they gave us. Here is some information from the question itself, like, quantitative data. So if you notice, also the means are here. I'll notice the prompt at the top. It says, state to what extent you found the following contents useful for your language assessment practices in your school. So for the most part, they found these assessment topics useful. That's why the range is 1, meaning there wasn't a lot of variability in their answers. They agreed that these topics were useful for their personal assessment practices. So this paints a very nice picture of the course, and I'm happy to show this. And let me show you kind of the flip side. This is what they said about course activities. In general, they thought that the course was, this is what one of the teachers said at the top. It was really awesome for me because I can have all the things that they can do in order to fulfill this topic, this assessment. So the activities that the teachers had included a lot of interaction with other people. So when the teacher said all the things that they can do, he meant other teachers in other Latin American countries, what they can do, so he learned from other people. So during the diagnosis stage, they told us, we want to learn from other people. And in the implementation stage, they could see that they learned from other people. We also asked them for the most useful activity and the least useful activity. So the most useful activity for them was analyzing instruments, because it is very important to know why, diagnostic, progress and achievement, and how the method according to the skills, listening, writing, etc., etc. So the act or the activity of analyzing assessment instruments was very illuminating for them. And the least useful activity, notice the trend, is calculating and interpreting basic statistics. And this is what the teacher said, because my country's curriculum is based on the formative assessment. So formative assessment is not so much concerned with numbers. And most of the time we use symbols and letters to give a learning process result. So they don't use numbers, they don't calculate statistics. So they didn't find a calculation of statistics as useful for their personal assessment context. And from the quantitative point of view, in terms of the activities, this is what the teacher said, analyzing assessment instruments was top. And notice that here the range is 0. What does that mean? Everybody, all 16 teachers agree that analyzing assessment instruments is the most useful activity to learn about assessment. So these are examples of activities they did during the class. I was the course instructor. I gave them activities for them to do this. And the rest of the activities were okay. The ones they didn't like so much, interpreting statistics or calculating statistics. But if you look at over these activities, like, for example, 26, participating in whole group discussions, they graded that with 4.7 on a scale from 1 to 5. So it was a pretty good number. For the most part, they liked the activities in which they participated. And regarding their impact, the impact of the course on their professional development, we also wanted to collect feedback from the teachers on how the course really influenced their professional development. This is something one of the teachers said. I realized that I was applying some methods, some strategies, some techniques, and some instruments also, but it was not in a professional way. So as you are engaged in an assessment course, you think of your past self and you say, oops, I was making mistakes. It was more empiric. No, sorry, it was empiric or just part of my teaching practice. So notice this intensifier here. Just part of my teaching practice. Like assessment was something there that was occurring, but it wasn't an explicit thing. Now that I'm going to be more professional with my teaching practices also. So the teacher is now aware that he or she needs to do something better in terms of assessment. And these are the this is the quantitative data we collected on teachers, on the impact of the course on their professional development. So all the teachers agreed with this first statement. They said, yes, this is something I agree with. While being in this course, I became aware of aspects I need to improve in language assessment. All of them agreed with that. So as you see there, range very low, 1. Most of them agree with this. And they either totally agreed or agreed. So this course definitely impacted their professional development in one way or another. And notice here, it fostered their language assessment literacy. In other words, the course helped them to improve their knowledge, their skills, and their principles in assessment. So for the conclusions that we collected, Dr. Shin and I collected from this second stage, which was the teaching of the course, we noticed that course contents need to have some sort of organization. That is obvious. We need to organize our contents in a way that is coherent, but that organization needs to reflect the diagnostic stage or the design stage. Teachers are critical when they see that connection and they give you feedback on that. Yes, Frank, I noticed that this topic was connected to the need I was telling you before during the design stage. And teachers think of the activities in which they are engaged from 2 perspectives. First, based on their cognition, meaning what they are learning. And also, they analyze the usefulness of their activities based on their teaching context. So they analyze the activities or the contents in a course in relation to their own professional development, their learning about assessment, but also their assessment in practice. Finally, the course did something very nice for them, which was reflection on the past. Oops, I was doing this before and I shouldn't do it anymore. So next, I'll do a better job. So reflection on the past and aiming at the future, like reflection on action and then reflection in action for future better practices. Some recommendations that I have for you, if you're interested in developing an assessment course for English language teachers, is from the point of view of characterizing LAL, meaning collecting feedback on teachers' language assessment literacy, you need to do 2 things. Address LAL top-down, meaning give teachers topics about assessment so that they give you feedback. This topic is interesting, this topic is not so interesting. But also bottom-up. Ask teachers to share with you their assessment needs, challenges, their assessment practices, their assessment contexts. So that's the first recommendation. When you collect feedback from top down and bottom up, you get a very nice counterbalanced approach. Second, you should use 2 data collection methods to draw teachers' LAL. This makes sense in the general research perspective because it helps you to triangulate. And just to remind you, our study was mixed methods. So we collected qualitative data through the interviews and quantitative data through the questionnaires. So we collected convergent data. And there has to be a clear connection, and this is something I emphasize throughout my presentation, between the description of teachers' LAL and the decisions you make as the course developer on the contents you want to include in the course. So that's for characterizing teachers' LAL and making decisions for the course. As you're teaching the course, definitely include activities that involve collaboration and definitely include activities in which teachers analyze and design assessments, but not randomly. As they are analyzing an assessment or designing an assessment instrument, they should do that with the help of theory and technical aspects. Okay, they want to analyze a rubric. Okay, how can they analyze a rubric in a way that sounds, 1, technical, and 2, theoretical? So their analysis is informed, seasoned, and professional. This is the end of my presentation. I'm going to open the floor for your questions. And let me stop the recording.